Hey everyone, Matthew here from Clicks and Sticks Gaming, and a little bit of a departure from some of the content on this channel. I'm going to do a video of a Alienware R10 Ryzen Edition fan replacement project. So I've been having some issues doing some computer gaming with some demanding games really pumping up the CPU temperatures. We've been getting them quite high, even resulting in some CPU throttling and some game crashes. So what we're looking to do here is replace the stock Alienware fans, the top and the front fans, with some new Noctua very quiet fans that should hopefully do the trick, lowering both the CPU and GPU temperatures overall. So come with us as we see how this works. Here's some typical temperatures that I would see during some demanding gaming with this Aurora R10. So really kind of getting into the 80s quite easily, 85 up to 90, where I'd start to see some throttling and crashes. So definitely something we want to address. This is the other issue other than CPU temperatures. The noise level of the fans in the Aurora are extremely loud, peaking upwards towards 80 decibels, which is absolutely insane during hard gameplay or benchmarking. I moved into 3D Mark to take a look at some quantitative testing and see how the GPU is actually being affected by the case temperatures as well, not just the CPU temperatures. Surprisingly, didn't even pass. So this is clear indication for me that the GPU is also struggling with the temperatures inside the case. Continuing on with 3D Mark, I ran TimeSpy Extreme just to see how it worked. This time it passed, got a score of 7321. I'm able to scroll down here and take a look at the actual CPU and GPU temperatures. So definitely a range higher than I'd like it to be, 70s into the 80s, and even a peak of 93. So not the temperatures that are really conducive to running this computer well, and I believe the fans are definitely going to help. So we'll see what the results are after the swap. For this case modification, we've chosen the Noctua NFA 12x25mm fans. Good premium fan, definitely really good in the mid-range in terms of pressure versus airflow. There are other alternatives in the Noctua line that give you either higher static pressure or maximum airflow. Felt this would be a good middle point for the fan modifications, given that usually you're running kind of in that middle range in terms of your RPMs, and you're looking for the absolute quietest fans at that point. And then if you do need to run them up to their kind of top end in terms of RPM, you'll get a little bit more noise, but I figured that these would fit the bill, and definitely lots of good stories about using these on forums and such. As well, I've got some Noctua thermal paste here, because when we are pulling off the all-in-one cooler off of the CPU, we're going to need to clean off the thermal paste and then reapply it both on the CPU and to the cooler. Now these Noctua fans are a 4-pin fan, so you'll be connecting these onto the motherboard, or if you have a fan header you can connect those in as well. And these are PWM, so they are speed adjustable right off the motherboard, which is exactly what I was looking for. Now this particular model comes with some definite extras. Comes with an extension cable. It's got a Y cable as well, so that you can daisy chain these fans if you want to, because not all motherboards are going to have multiple fan connections. It's got a low noise adapter, which I'm not intending to use. It's got some anti-vibration mounts, same thing, they're there if you find any issues, you could always put them in. Comes with fan screws, also got an anti-vibration gasket for putting onto radiators, so we may look to put that on in this case, because we are planning to put 2 of these fans on the radiator for the all-in-one. In terms of tools you're going to need for this work, always good to get them out ahead of time. I've got a good selection here set aside. So really looking at Phillips head screwdrivers, that should be the only type of screwdriver you're typically going to need for working inside the computer case. The one fan position, the upper front fan, we are going to require taking a 3.5-inch hard drive caddy out. If you've got that in your case, I highly recommend taking it out if you're going to proceed with the upper fan installation. It also, what I've learned in doing some testing, I pulled it out previously, it does seem to impede a lot of airflow even passively coming into the case. So if you're going to do anything besides putting in the fans, make sure that you take that hard drive caddy out. As well, I've got some spare fan screws here, as well as this kit that I picked up has some 30mm long screws, which we're going to need for sandwiching the all-in-one radiator in between 2 of the Noctua fans. So in order to put that upper fan in as well, if you're going to go that far, you can either put it in with double-sided tape here, which I've got some sitting here from 3M, As well, you can also put it in with some zip ties. So we'll see as we get in which method we go with. Here you can see the fans taken out of the packaging. I've already prepared 2 of the fans, the ones in the bottom. You can see they now have the anti-vibration gasket running around the perimeter. Noctua recommends that for installing on any water cooling radiators like we're going to with our all-in-one. And then you can just see the regular fan up top with the anti-vibration pads in the 4 corners. It's kind of the main difference is we're going to be tightening those 2 fans on the bottom, kind of in a push-pull configuration on the radiator. So it's really going to pull that warm air right through the radiator and out. And the anti-vibration gasket's going to get us a little bit of a tighter seal to that radiator on each side. Here's the back of the R10 case. This should look very familiar to anybody with anything from an R6 all the way through an R12. They're pretty much identical backs, similar motherboards. If you haven't opened your case before, relatively simple. You can see at the top here, just one Phillips screw. Unscrew this, get it loose, doesn't have to come out. You'll be able to pull this, and you can see you've now got side of the case available to take off. So just take that off, set it aside, and you're good to start working. After you've gently laid the case on its side, now that we've removed the left side case panel, you'll be able to see the power supply unit in the middle. The easiest way to get that open, there are 2 latches that need to be moved into the vertical positions or to the unlocked side, and then you'll be able to lift the power supply up and out of the way on its swing arm. Key piece here, we didn't show it in the earlier tools, but you'll need a anti-static strap ideally to protect your delicate components from any potential static discharge. So you want to get that connected to your case on the bare metal, connected to your wrist, and then you should not have any static charge into your case. So we'll pop these latches up after we ground ourselves. Up, up, just grip here gently and swing that up. Here's a better look inside the case for the areas we're going to be working on. Now for those of you with the liquid air cooler, the all-in-one, so this component here, it's got the hoses running. You'll just be able to see inside there. You can see the top fan. There are only 2 fans in this unit, the top fan and the front fan. You'll just be able to see the front fan hiding back in here. We will be able to get access to that with the video card out. The other key piece to have a look at, this bay here is where the 3.5-inch drive caddy was. So I've since removed that previously, and as I mentioned earlier, had some good success with a little more airflow coming into the case there, although the PSU still does block a fair amount of it. So this mod, looking to fix that up a little bit. You can see the graphics card here with the graphics card holder in place. We're going to be removing that as well. So we're really going to need to take some of these components out and get good access into the case in order to work on this. First step, get at that front fan. You're going to want to pop this out. Just a gentle lift, rotate it out, and set it aside. That'll free up your graphics card for a little bit of access. So you'll take the power connections gently off, just a little pop, little latches there, and then gentle tug, and get those out of the way. So now your graphics card is going to be available to pull out. You'll be able to take a look inside. On this particular motherboard, there'll just be a little blue colored latch that you'll need to reach in and pop open, and then pop that graphics card out. And just watch with your clearance here, because there is a little holder there as well in some of the graphics cards. And then that is out, and set it aside as well. Just get a little more visual inspection of the case now that we've got the graphics card out. Have a bit of a zoom in there. You can see right in front of you is that front fan that Alienware names it. Now itself, it's in a bit of a cage. So when we pop that out, we're going to be taking it just a little tab off the top and then pulling it out. Then we'll make sure to disconnect the power. You can see again, as we mentioned before, the 3.5-inch drive caddy right here where we're going to end up putting a second fan. So we'll end up with 2 front fans pulling air directly in. So we'll be able to cool the motherboard as well as the graphics card in addition to the graphics card fans. And then just a little better look underneath here at the all-in-one there, and then the fan on the underside of the radiator. And we'll get to that radiator as the last step of this project. Getting a good close-up view now of that front fan. First thing we're going to do before we touch that fan, we're going to reach in from this view, top left portion of the motherboard. You're going to undo your fan power. Just reach right in there. And this is that 4-pin Just gently wiggle it off, being careful not to harm the pins. And now our power's off. We'll be able then to route that cable. You can see it's loose now. All right, reaching in, we'll be able to pop out this cage for the lower front fan. It's a bit of just a push in as you kind of push down, just to let that tab clear. And then you want to make sure that your cables are clear. Gently get that out, just kind of a straight up, and out it comes. You can take a look. There's the stock fan. Now these Dell fans are quite fast at high RPM. They move a fair amount of flow, but they are also super duper loud. So replacing this I think should be a worthwhile modification. Here's the replacement lower front fan we've got here. You can take a look, you can see where the power cable is coming out. That's the 4-pin cable. Now on the underside of this, all these fans are going to have markings on them that clearly show the direction of airflow. So in this case, we can take a look and see that this is going to be pulling air in. So you want to make sure that we're putting that in the right orientation so that it's pulling air properly into the case as desired. And then you can basically move that power cable wherever you need to, whatever orientation you'd like, so that it's easier to plug it into the board. In this case, we're going to be using the Y-splitter because we're going to be putting 2 fans into this location. Okay, so the stock fan can just be pulled, gentle pressure, release the tabs on either side. This may take you a little bit to work at it, but it will come out. And just pull that power cable through. Okay, once you're ready to put the Noctua fan into this cage, you want to make sure you're taking a look where the power cable is, double checking the direction of the airflow so it's going in, and paying attention that this blue needs to be pointing in towards the case. So we'll just kind of route that cable as you're pushing it in, make sure that it's trapped inside the cage, and just gently push in, and be very careful as you're pushing these in. The Noctua anti-vibration pads here may require a little bit of finessing just so that they don't get caught up on the tabs of the cage here. And then trap that power cable there, just down the channel. So take a good look, make sure that you've got all those nicely seated. If you need to, give it a little bit of time just to make sure that's in properly. And the key piece, make sure that the label is facing inwards. So now, as you pivot that around, that's where you're looking at. Okay, when we're ready to install it into the case, we'll take a look. You can see these little tabs here. One of those is going to go into the bottom. Just want to make sure you're just looking in, getting those into the little receiver slots, pushing this down just a bit, and then snapping it in. And that's it. You've got your power cable here ready to be either plugged in directly to the board or to be plugged into a Y for your second fan. Next step, we need to get the power supply swing arm out of the way in order to access the top fan. So key piece, rotate this back gently and close it up. Relocate your ground as necessary if you are using a static wristband. And now we're taking a look at the drive bay here. You can see through the grill, plenty of space there. This is perfectly sized for this Noctua fan. Again, key piece you want to do, have a look, make sure that you've lined up. Recommend having a look at this. Again, airflow inwards, label side inwards, and then take a good look at where you want to have that power cable. If you have this at the bottom, that little bend there is going to stand it up off a bit. So you're going to want to have it probably off to the side here. And it's just gently going to fit in just like that and sit nicely against the bottom. Now what we're going to do, one extra step, we're going to end up with some double-sided tape on this. So we're going to pull this back out and get to some tape. Okay, we've got some Scotch little squares here. So this is the double-sided tape. You can see just comes in a sheet, real easy, 4 pieces. Ultimately, if you wanted to, you could put this into the case here, and you could look to zip tie to any of these areas in here. I figure that this is going to be substantially simpler. Just peel off, stick it in, and slide it in. Okay, we've got the 4 pieces applied, backing tape removed. And again, we want to make sure to rotate this around. I think we should have the power up here. So the sticky is on the back. We're going to just want to gently get that in there, keeping that power cable away and being real careful that we don't end up squishing or moving that double-sided tape away until it's at the bottom. Get it kind of nestled at the bottom and then just gently reach in, give it a bit of a push, and that sticky side tape should just hold it in place. There is some metal there that it comes off. So just give it a nice push and it should be good. So, alternate method of installation if you're finding that the double-sided tape is not working, and that was the case for me here. The double-sided tape and the little protruding tabs there really wasn't holding it tight, especially with the anti-vibration pads in the corners here. That tape just wasn't sticking to them great. So what we're doing is we've changed gears, and we've now got some small zip ties, and got them through those tabs at the back, and then just through a single screw hole. So once these are tightened up, it should hold it super duper tight, especially once we get the case in a vertical orientation. Alright, we've got that top front fan now fixed properly. So we can see we've got the zip ties in place, and I'm going to cut the tails off these just to make sure that it's good. But you'll be able to see it is definitely in there nice and tight now. No chance of it moving or the double-sided tape losing its adhesiveness and then having your fan kind of fall a bit into the case. Okay, now that we've got that Noctua fan in there, you can now see both of those nice fans are in there for supplying air. Okay, we're now taking a look in here. You can just see on the motherboard there the 4 pins, and that's where we're going to connect in our Y splitter from the Noctua fans. Okay, we're going to take our Y splitter and just adjusting the guides. You can just see at the back of here there are little guides there. You're just going to gently get that on. Okay, we've now got the Y splitter attached. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, but we've got 4 pins here, 3 pins here. We're going to connect the upper top fan to the 4 pin, and then we'll slave the lower via the 3rd pin. But the splitter is going to provide same input to both, and they'll run the same speed. But the top one will be the one that's really getting the speed controlled. Okay, just a quick connection. Here's the top fan and the bottom fan, and that is in there. We can clean up those cables a little later, but knowing that this swing arm is going to come down, we're going to want to have them a little lower. Next step is to get our case vertical again, so I've got it here vertical, and the upper case cover is going to need to come off. And this does have some clips, and you don't want to be touching anything down here, so we're really looking about here, and just kind of giving it a bit of a tug, just like that. Doesn't take a ton of force, but you want to be very gentle. Just kind of work it a bit from the back, work your way towards the front. Try not to be disconcerted by the sound of the clips coming off. And this is now the underside of your top case. Radiator here, 1, 2, 3, 4 screws here. That'll allow us to drop the radiator out. And then on the inside here is where we'll be getting at the all-in cooler. We may have to take some components out there to take care of that. Okay, grab your Phillips screwdriver. Just going to take these 4 screws out. Make sure you're putting those screws where you can find them again. And be really careful with these radiator fins. They are very, very easy to damage. Okay, just proceeding to pull the CPU power. Unplug this guy. Just kind of set it off to the side so we have a little more room. Now in my case here, the fan pump power, again, another 4-pin connector. We'll just want to make sure that that's kind of out of the way. It happens to be labeled fan pump 1, so you're not going to be able to mix it up on the way back. And then the top fan here as well. That power will just get wiggled out. And again, being careful with the pins. Okay, that sets us up now to pull the all-in-one cooler. All-in-one cooler, again, not difficult. Just 4 screws. You'll be able to see it just spring a little bit off the CPU as it comes off. Alright, we take a look at the CPU cooler. Just gently lift that off and be able to see thermal paste that's come from the CPU spread out nicely onto the all-in-one cooler. So that's going to have to be cleaned off. Both CPU and the cooler. We'll clean that off with alcohol wipes, and then we'll apply some new paste when we're ready to put it back on. Give ourselves a bit more room. We're also going to pop the RAM out. So just 4 little latches, and then that comes out nicely. And moving on to the heatsink. This Phillips head is a little smaller, so this is where we're going to get slightly smaller head screwdriver, just to get at that. Okay, we'll gently pull it out. You can see some thermal pads on there, help with heat dissipation. We'll set that aside and we'll make sure that we don't touch those, and we'll just put those back together again. Same process for removing the other heatsink that allow us to get room to pull the radiator assembly out. It's not going to come out with both of them there. And with that out, we should have enough room now to pull the assembly out. With the second heatsink out now, we'll have our clearance. Gently pull that radiator assembly out, straight out. Make sure you lift that cooler up, and there you go. You can see on the top and the bottom, and this fan is what we're going to be replacing with 2 of the Noctua fans. So just bring that out and set it aside. Alright, before we move further with the installation, we're going to clean the thermal paste off of the CPU, and then we'll do the same thing for the heatsink. Now the Noctua kit that we picked up, the HTN2, it includes thermal paste as well as cleaning wipes. So we're just going to gently clean this off. Doesn't take too much effort. You just see it come off nicely. There we go, and that's the 5900X AMD. Okay, continuing on, 1 wipe from this kit should do you for cleaning everything off the heatsink as well. It actually looks here, if you can see it, this is very, very easy to mar material, and in this case it looks like we actually have a little bit of gouge there from factory installation of this cooler. So we're going to be very careful when we install it to not over torque it. Having a look at the radiator assembly now, we can see how the fan is connected to the radiator itself. Just 4 screws here. What you're going to find though is that standard screwdriver, Phillips screwdriver, not actually going to fit through the top here. So we're actually going to need to have a look at something that's got a thinner shaft on it. Getting a screwdriver with a thinner shaft will allow us to go right inside, and then just a little easier to get those undone. So we're going to repeat that 4 different times. Continuing with that, just need 2 hands here just to break that screw out. And spin that around to get the remaining 2. No power here. Probably just going to need to pull that back just a little bit in order to get access to this screw here. And then move the cooler just a bit as well to get access to the final screw. And then we'll remove those screws. Once you've got those screws out, we'll just lift that fan right off the radiator base. Again, being very careful with those fins, and set that aside. Just having a look at the fan. Obviously quite a heavy duty fan, but part of the issue is the noise of it. So this will spin quite fast as well, but quite noisy for the top fan. So we're going to replace this with the Noctuas. Should give us the result we're looking for with substantially quieter operation. Moving on, we've got our Noctua fans now ready to go for installation on the radiator. So it's going to be key that the anti-vibration gasket, if you're choosing to use it in this application, is already on. This fan will be on the underside of the radiator. We're going to double check the direction of flow. When this is flipped on the underside of the radiator, it'll be pulling air into the radiator. The other fan will actually be the opposite. We can see that the airflow is this direction. This will be sitting on the top. So the gasket in this application will be on the top of the radiator. We've also got our 30mm screws here. We'll need 8 of these, 4 for each side to get each fan in place. Okay, we've just dry fit now the fans. Again, this fan will be the underside of the radiator, and then the upper fan is now on the bottom of the radiator. This will of course be flipped and then put into the case and secured on the top. We've got our 30mm screws here, and they're just going to be put in like this. You'll line it with the holes and then put them in. Once you've got your screws aligned, make it much easier to go in, and then we'll just gently tighten these down. We'll then flip it over, repeat for the other side. Once we've made sure that everything fits on, we've got the bottom fan installed in the radiator. The next step is we're going to gently slide it in and then get it secured from above with the other fan, so that those 30mm screws go right through the upper fan, keeping in mind the orientation for a pull configuration, and then tightening that up. That'll secure it at the top, and we'll move on to the next step. Next step is to take your upper radiator fan, get it into the case here, just gently move that in, get it roughly lined up, and then make sure that that power cable is kind of in the bottom corner there. There's a little bit of a cutout on part of the radiator that'll allow that to get through. Next, we're going to take the radiator assembly, gently get it in, kind of a bit of an angle there, make sure that we're clearing all the pins and everything. And as well, taking into consideration that power cable, trying to get that tucked down in the corner so it has a little bit of clearance. And then just gently snug that in place like that. What you'll notice is, compared to before, now this protrudes, an extra inch or so in, but there's still clearance. And then we will just gently put that cooler down, and we'll move to the other side to secure the entire radiator assembly together with the remaining 4 screws. Looking at the case from the top, you can now see we've just got the 4 screws loosely in place. Then what we'll need to do is, working from the back side, just gently move that radiator assembly around, get the screws lined up, and then secure them in place. It'll take some trial and error for sure, but once you've got it in, you'll have upper fan through the radiator bracket into the top of the radiator, and the entire assembly will be rock solid. You won't need to worry about the screws that we removed originally. Now we can move on to thermal paste on the CPU and getting the rest of our components reinstalled. Alright, before we install the cooler on the CPU again, we have to get thermal paste onto the CPU. So Noctua, according to the kit, would consider this Ryzen chip to be a mid-sized chip. So they recommend 4 dots, about 2mm size each dot, kind of in the corners, and then about 3 to 4mm diameter dot in the center of it. And then that, when we press down with the heatsink, it will spread that thermal paste out nicely. Okay, we're just going to take our thermal paste then, get in there, in the middle, and Noctua doesn't require their paste to be spread around. It's totally up to you, personal preference, but I've got a good amount of thermal paste here, and then I'll apply the heatsink to it, and we will then start to secure it down. Alright, we're going to start putting the heat sinks back in, just to get those in place so that we have lots of, well, Once these start to go back in, we will not have any more room to work. So we're going to get that in place. Move on to the next one. And that's done. The next step is going to be a little more challenging. Because we've moved the fans now a little closer, we're going to have a bit of a tighter bend radius on these liquid cooling lines. So we're going to have to be careful, but we do have the heat sinks back in place. So we're just going to have to be real gentle, get that in place, and then start to screw it down. Okay, once we've lined up those screw holes, we can take a look at the cooler itself. It actually lists off a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So we just start to get those threads getting started there. 2, 3, and 4. And that should be on there reasonably well, and then we'll just continue to torque it down. So following that pattern, we're just going to make sure that these get down just snug. Do not want to over torque them. So just snug so that they're not turning anymore. And it's in. Final steps here are just in reverse of what we did when we were getting things going. So we want to get CPU power seated again, just on the board there. We want to get our pump fan kind of routed back in, plugged in again, just paying attention to the guides. Okay, and then we're going to have a look, same thing we did for the front two fans. We're going to take a look, we're going to use our Y splitter, and we're going to connect those two fans back into the top fan on the motherboard. So as you can see, we got our Y splitter in there, installed, pump fan, power. We got everything ready to go in terms of those fans. We're now going to continue to put in RAM, and then we'll get the GPU in place, and we should be wrapping up. You can also move on to doing a little bit of cable cleanup here, make sure that things are tucked out of the way, because the PSU swing arm still has to come down. Okay, with some cables tucked away, we've kind of got the fan cables with the splitters tucked away here and here, keeping everything away so that there's no chance anything is going to get into that fan. We're going to take our RAM sticks, make sure that they're put back in the usually color-coded offset slots. So we've got it in kind of slot 2 and 4 here for these RAMs. And just push in, make sure those snap in, and you're good to go. Last step of the interior piece here is getting GPU back in. So this is the 3080 LHR that we've got for this unit. And the key piece here, this piece here on the end, needs to slide just underneath the swing arm. So you'll just want to make sure that your cables are clear. Can I get that hooked a little bit? Get this in first. Hook it a bit underneath. Now in my case, the fan cables need to be moved just a little bit. Just push down a tiny bit. So they're hooked underneath. And then make sure that you've lined up your PCI slot, and then just give it a gentle push down, and you should hear that click. Now everything is going to be in place. Then we're going to do our last step, getting this piece hooked in, kind of the Dell holder, if you will, for that GPU. Just kind of hook in there, push the board ever so slightly, and it'll just sit there and allow you to swing that CPU back down. A couple quick movements of some of your power cables, and you're basically done, with the exception of putting the upper case back on. Last step, just to, sometimes easier with that PSU closed, just to get your 2 power connections for your GPU just snapped back in. Then just have a final survey, make sure that things look good. Often with these Dells, Good to kind of tuck things away there. Make sure nothing's going to be in the way when we get that left side case panel back on. Okay, final pieces here. Now we can see the Noctua fan fully secured in with those 4 screws. We're just going to gently put that on top. Start to work it down kind of from the front. Just looking to get those clips to snap in. Then you'll look on the back side and just make sure that you've got a nice smooth line and that the case pieces are aligned. Final steps for case assembly. We're going to lock the PSU in with those 2 latches, and then we're going to take a look at the case here. So there's a couple little ramps here that we need to make sure kind of go into some associated holes in the bottom. So maybe like a 30, 45 degree angle, just like that. Get them seated down, and then just give it a slap. You notice that this pops open. You can choose to leave that screw out if you want. It's not going to make a difference. And your case is assembled. Your modification is done. After changing out the fans, I definitely noticed a large difference in the noise levels of the computer. So here is a shot just showing kind of ranging between 20s up into 30s for decibels. So a marked improvement when it's not working hard. Definitely notice a difference as well in the temperatures. This is during some additional benchmarking. Temperatures kind of getting into the low to mid 70s, really never pushing past 80, which is exactly where I'd hope to see it. Again, during benchmarking, the noise level of the fan definitely came down from the peak of 80 as seen pre-test now to the kind of 50s, so definitely impressive. Getting back into 3D Mark, taking a look post-fan replacement, seeing a little bit of an improvement in the times by extreme score, but I think more noticeably were the temperatures. So definitely saw a drop in temperatures from a peak previously, kind of up in the 93 range. Now we're down into temperatures really peaking no higher than 80, so kind of mid to low 70s, nothing higher than 80, definitely impressive. Final benchmarking test in 3D Mark was back to the Speedway score, this time successfully passed the test, and definitely had very flat CPU and GPU temperatures, so very happy with that. Really kind of in the 60s into the low 70s, definitely where we wanted to see these, and proving that the fan replacement project was overall a success.